What's going on, everyone? It's time to start reviewing some of the results that are pouring in. We have one tournament actually completely finished with a winner, and the other one, which we have a day 2 conversion, which will probably receive a winner later today. And I'll probably post an update in a little community post for you all. This is a pretty important weekend, as it'll probably determine the state of the meta on Wednesday, when we have the update stream from FFG. So the actual meta from these tournaments isn't going to determine the meta in terms of set 4 necessarily. It's going to determine what FFG will be doing on Wednesday to determine what the meta should be like. Okay. And I'll say this, it's probably not surprising, but I don't really think anything has changed since yesterday and from last week, really. Let's dive into our first one, Liverpool. Okay. A big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. I got a TCG player link in the description down below. Blah, 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 blah. Let's talk Jango. Let's talk Bosk Blue, who actually took down the Liverpool tournament. 418 players. We talked about this yesterday. 18.3% of the meta showing up. We've got 3 Jango Reds in the top 8. A pretty good conversion rate. Just under the 50% of top 8s, but still a major amount of the top 8s. Still within a concerning amount. Even if you were to just take this one tournament, 3 of the top 8s being Jango Red is still a lot of Jango Reds. And seeing that the finals was a Jango Red versus Bosk Blue, and Bosk Blue takes it, is not surprising whatsoever. The 2 decks that I would consider the best to be up against Jango, the Cad Bane Blue deck that we specifically played the other day about countering Jango, that was literally built to counter Jango, and then Bosk Blue, the other hard control list, or the more controlling list, that is literally all about not playing units so that you can just win the game when you drop your Avengers and your Snokes and that type of stuff later on in the game. Literal just dream matchup for Bosk Blue is to fight up against Jango Red. It's one of the decks that I had recommended to a lot of people. Hey, if you want a reliable deck that's not going to be like specifically to counter Jango, Bosk Blue is probably where it's at. Cad Bane Blue, still a decent deck overall, but doesn't quite have the same matchup viability as Bosk Blue outside of Jango. We got Jango, 3 of the 8 top 8s. Guys, I love seeing this, but we actually have a Gar Saxon yellow. And this is a list that I cannot wait to talk about, because Gar Saxon yellow is like one of my favorite decks to play. We also have a Quinlan Red, not surprising, and Anakin Blue, also not super surprising, although, well, can be a little bit tricky to play. A Han 1 Blue coming in as well. And then, of course, as we said, the Bosk Blue. Overall, pretty interesting meta outside of the Jangos, right? Like, if this was the meta breakdown outside of the Jangos and we just filled in with a bunch of other random decks, I think this would be a pretty happy meta. We got a hard control list coming in first. We've got a pretty good mid-range soft control list in Anakin Blue. If Jango Red was whatever tempo deck / aggro deck, okay. Quinlan, another kind of tempo, more aggro deck. Gar Saxon, a little bit more value-y, mid-range style. All of this, pretty fun stuff. But let's dive into the Gar Saxon yellow before we dive into the actual matchup win percentages. Just real quick, because I do want to talk about the meta mainly, but I just wanted to quickly mention this Gar Saxon list. I mean, an absolutely amazing fun time. They have the 3 of Director Krennic, the 3 of Crafty Smugglers, 3/2 Shieldeds on turn 1 is absolutely amazing. They have things like the Super Commando Squad, which we're used to. The Shuttle with the Krennic on turn 2 is absolutely amazing. We've played all this stuff. The 7 Fleet Defender, 3/2 into a 4/2 Shielded Space Unit. Just, again, another absolutely amazing card. We have Greedos. The Greedo's really interesting in this deck because you can go Krennic plus Greedo on turn 1. You get a 3/2 Shielded and a 3/1. Insanely aggressive start. Outer Rim Outlaws, one of the commons from set 4. After the fact that I had kind of made my Gar Saxon yellow deck, this is a great addition. It's a 4/3 shielded for 3. We have Iden Versio, another great one that you can go ahead and drop on a space unit. But overall, I mean, pretty much the exact same thing that everyone had been playing with Gar Saxon. I think the snapshot reflex is an amazing upgrade. It's like one of the guaranteed upgrades you should be playing in Gar Saxon. Asteroid Sanctuary, that's one that I had not played at all. And that one's a great addition. Being able to exhaust units and put shield tokens on really makes a lot of sense when you're up against Jango, right? Preventing the exhausting, but also just pumps up your units. I mean, this Gar Saxon list is absolutely sweet. I can't wait to dive into it more in another date. But this is mainly what I want to talk about today. The actual win percentages that we're seeing from Jango. If you look across the board, it's got some either really stable matchups or absolute dominant matchups from Jango Red overall. The closest one in terms of like being favored but not like super favored is actually Quinlan Red, which makes sense. Still slightly Jango favored, but a pretty decent skill matchup, which is really nice. A little bit surprising, actually, Han 1 yellow, Gar Saxon yellow, Anakin blue, which I would not have thought Anakin blue. Now, granted, this isn't like an insane sample size, so don't take this as fact, but also slightly losing matchups for Jango, but still pretty close. And then you start seeing like the vast majority of like the mega winning matchups. Boba 4 yellow, that is a super big contender. 60% favored. Sabine green, 63%. Palp blue, 69%. Piet blue, 67%. Luke green, 70%. Cad Bane red, 83%. Like, again, we don't know exactly when we're pulling in a lot of this data, whether or not this is going to remain consistent, which players were fighting which. I don't know in terms of what all that is yet. I'll leave a link to this spreadsheet. There's a lot of data in here if you guys want to dive into it. This is just the Liverpool, right? Match percentage / the base color, right? If you look at like all major percentage match win rate, you'll look at this, and again, still slightly favor for Sabine. Boba, Han yellow is a little bit more even. Quinlan is even more even. The Piet blue, like all of this still remains relatively consistent in terms of like who's favored versus who's not. And you can see Cad Bane red, well, not nearly like the 83% favor, but still heavily favoring Jango Red. Pretty crazy. But guess what the two really bad matchups for Jango are? Cad Bane blue, Bosk blue. If we look at that again, we've got Cad blue 36%, Bosk blue 36%. Literally exactly the same in terms of overall match win percentage. This is incredibly interesting and really, really harming for Jango, because if Jango is reliant on, or you are reliant on these Omega hard control lists or the more controlling lists to actually defeat Jango, you enter into a stage where I think people are going to hate the meta even more. And this is what I had mentioned about Jango previously. Like, yes, Jango, it's one thing to have Jango be dominant. It's another thing for Jango to completely warp the meta, even if you are not seeing as much Jango, but to introduce other decks that people do not want to be seeing in the meta. And they even mentioned this. FFG specifically said they want to steer away from the controlling decks. They want to go towards a more mid-range style where actually people have ability to participate and the game isn't over in like 30 turns, right? That's what they said they wanted to do. So considering that Jango's already dominant, considering that their win percentages are pretty insane across the board, and then the only real counter that we're really seeing tends to be these more controlling lists, completely goes against everything that FFG is trying to do here. It just completely goes against anything that they have said. So yes, Jango Red looking to be on the chopping block, looks to be a little bit of a nightmare. I could absolutely see them just removing the leader on Wednesday. But that's not all. We got another little tournament to talk about, guys. And I'm not going to say too long on this whole video because we've talked about this numerous amounts of times. I just wanted to give you like a little bit of the data going on, not data that I've sourced, just data that is out there for the tournaments, right? Denver sector qualifier day 2. This is day 2 of those the American tournament. We have Jango Fett, looks like 18% turnout, 44% of the day 2. 44%, 16 of the day 2 decks. That is incredibly high. Incredibly high. Now, I don't know the top 8 yet. as of recording this video. But I mean, if you just look at these matchups and we look at the decks and versus like what we were seeing in terms of win rates, right? Jango looks favored to take down every single one of these decks for the most part. Like Han was one that it was slightly less favored, and Quinlan was slightly favored, but they're pretty close in terms of win percentage. So I think Jango definitely has an advantage here overall. And you can look here, what are the 16 lists? 12 of them Tarkin Town, 4 of them are 30 HP red bases. I definitely lean towards the Tarkin Town, by the way. If anyone's curious about Jango Fett and the strength of the deck, I think Tarkin Town in general is going to be a stronger list. Just something to consider. But all Jango Red, all of them Jango Red, like all of them. And I could absolutely see this being at least 3 of 8, 4 of 8, 5 of 8, top 8s being Jango Fett. And I'll give you an update later today when we actually get this data in. But oh my gosh, like this is just continuously popping up. And we're at like week 2 when people were like, well, wait for week 2. Like, of course, everyone's going to play Jango, this, and that, and the other thing. Guys, if this is what we're seeing like already in week 1 of the meta into week 2, and the only clear decks that you could be playing up against Jango Fett being Bosk Blue and Cad Bane Blue, and the other ones being a pretty severe disadvantage. Now, some of them are a slight advantage. Like I said, Han looks to be, in terms of just win percentage, depending on, you know, who you ask, that can change. But like Han, you've got Anakin Blue, it seems like. You've got, what was the other one that was slightly disadvantaged for Jango? But pretty close. Those ones are reasonable. But then we got like 60% win rate for a ton of other major decks. I think Jango is just going to be the ban target. That's like just straight up. That's what I think. We've talked a lot about what you should do, what might be the option for FFG. Should they be banning Triple Dark Raid and all this other stuff? Based on what I think about FFG, I think they're just going to ban Jango. That's what I think. Now, I could be very wrong, and we could see something out of left field like, hey, we're going to be banning this, 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 and this because we don't like how the meta is, and we want to see it move towards that mid-range style that we're looking for, right? Because that is what they said. And things like Triple Dark Raid, things like these more aggressive decks like Quinlan, heck, even like Force Throw could potentially be banned. Like, I don't know, Plo Koon, and like take something away from Quinlan, even though I don't think that's necessary. I don't think Quinlan's a huge problem. But the cunning aspect in general kind of isn't that mid-range style that they're looking for. It's a lot more disruptive, a lot more aggressive, which might not be something that they want in their meta anyways. So we could see something out of complete left field from FG. I shouldn't say complete left field because they have explicitly stated that they wanted a more mid-range style of meta. They could just like force everyone's hand to go towards that direction. And we'll see if that's what the community wants, right? With how they decide to balance the game. But if they just ban Jango, we are going to see a pretty cunning dominated meta, right? We're going to see the Hans, we're going to see the Quinlans, we're going to see all that good stuff, Boba 4, right? Those are just going to be the best decks in the format. And that could be good for some, bad for others. I mean, cunning is a separate discussion of its entirely. I don't think cunning is like this incredibly desperate problem that FFG needs to solve this week. But I do think Jango and like this meta is something that FFG needs to address this week. That is something that I do think needs to happen because, again, we're already starting to see a little bit of a shift. And now that Bosk Blue has taken number 1, we're going to see a little bit more shifting towards that direction. We've seen people talk about Cad Bane Blue. I am being one of them. We've seen people talk about Bosk Blue. Again, myself being one of them, being decks that you're going to want to be playing up against Jango Fett. As soon as that catches wind, if Jango isn't banned next week, like let's say the announcement is Jango is not banned, we're going to see a significant shift towards people playing Bosk and Cad Bane going forward. And we could see a huge meta shift towards something that FFG literally doesn't want, which is this hard control meta. Jango and then hard control. And then them battling each other out, right? Like that sounds really tough for a lot of people to deal with. So we will see what they decide to do. That's the update. I'll give you an update on the top 8 when that comes. Outside of that, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I am very curious to see what they have to say on Wednesday. I am very curious. I cannot wait to hear what they have to say. But at this point, this is kind of all we have to talk about for the tournaments, right? I don't think there's much else to say. Like, we could sit here talking about the meta and like which ones are problems, which ones are not. I know they're going to be addressing Jango. I think Jango's such a sore thumb right now that it's hard to determine what else is the problem. Like, decks that are extremely disadvantaged against Jango haven't had a chance. So until we see a change there, we're not going to see what the actual state of the meta is, although we can make predictions. But after we actually see that change, that's when we can discuss, okay, where are we at in terms of the overall balance of the game? Because Jango's just that like really random, like really strong list, right? And that's where we're at right now. So let's see it. Can't wait for Wednesday. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all for the next day.